My name is Tammy Brooks, and I am 30 years old. I watched my boyfriend lean close and whisper 5 words that ended everything. Please don't say anything in front of my friends. He straightened, smiled at the table, and then walked past the empty chair beside me to sit next to Lena, his ex-girlfriend. Then he looked back at me, still standing, and pointed to the far end of the table. Tammy, you can take that seat down there. 8 people watched it happen. I stood there holding my jacket, staring at the chair he saved for her, then at the chair he assigned me, separated from him by 4 people I had never met and 2 I barely knew. No one moved, no one offered to switch, no one even looked surprised. It was like they'd all silently agreed this was normal, and I was the one who hadn't gotten the memo. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I didn't say a word. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair and walked out of the restaurant. We'd arrived at 7 sharp, reservation for 8. A long table tucked into the back corner of an Italian place downtown, warm lights, clinking glasses, laughter already in full swing when we walked in. Evan, my boyfriend, spotted his friends immediately. His face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Then he saw Lena. She stood up fast. Too fast. Wrapped her arms around him like muscle memory had kicked in before thought could stop it. I can't believe you're here, she said. The hug lasted just a second too long, long enough that I shifted my weight, long enough that I felt invisible. I stood there waiting to be introduced. It didn't happen. Evan jumped straight into conversation, asking about jobs, apartments, people from college, laughing, touching Lena's arm when she made a joke. I recognized 2 people from past hangouts. The rest were strangers. One of the women finally noticed me and said, "Oh, hi, I'm Marissa. You're Evan's girlfriend, right?" "Yes," I said. Evan glanced at me like he'd forgotten I was there. "Oh yeah," he added casually. "This is Tammy." That was it. No context, no warmth, no pride, just a name, dropped into the air and left to land wherever it could. I pulled out the chair beside Evan because that's what couples do. That's what felt normal. That's what my body expected. That's when he touched my arm, leaned in close, and whispered, "Please don't say anything in front of my friends." I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "Just don't make it awkward. They don't really know you yet." Then he walked past the chair I was standing beside and sat down next to Lena like it was already decided, like it had always been her seat. He pointed to the end of the table where a single chair sat slightly apart from the group. "Tammy, you can sit down there." Something in my chest went completely still. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds. It felt like a lifetime. I could have sat down and swallowed it. I could have dragged a chair over and forced the issue. I could have asked him right there why he was humiliating me in front of people who were supposed to matter. But then I realized something terrifyingly clear. If I sat in that chair, I'd be agreeing with his version of me. Quiet, secondary, convenient, replaceable. So I left. I heard Evan say my name once, confused, like I'd missed my cue. I didn't turn around. I walked straight out, pushed through the door, and didn't stop until I was in my car with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I drove without direction. My chest felt tight. My mind replayed the same loop over and over. The whisper, the smile, the way he sat next to her and sent me away like I was a problem to manage, not a person he loved. I pulled into a parking lot near my old apartment and turned the engine off. I set my phone on silent and stared at the windshield until my breathing slowed. 20 minutes later, I checked my phone. 47 messages, most from Evan, some from numbers I didn't recognize. People he'd clearly dragged into this, like I was something broken that needed to be fixed. "Where did you go? This is embarrassing. It was just a seating thing. Why are you making this a big deal? Please come back." Lena asked where you went. I told her you weren't feeling well. "Don't make me look like a liar. I love you. I didn't mean it like that. Please, I'm begging you." The messages kept getting longer, more frantic, less defensive. He said he was scared. He said he was leaving the restaurant. He said he was coming to find me. I turned my phone off completely. That night, sitting alone in the dark, I finally admitted something I'd been avoiding for months. This wasn't the first time I'd felt small with him. It was just the first time he did it where everyone could see. And when the sun came up, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back to talk. I was going back to leave. I met Evan 2 years ago at a coffee shop near my office. It was raining outside, the kind of Portland drizzle that never fully commits, and he'd offered to share the last open table when the place filled up. He was charming in a quiet way, thoughtful, the kind of man who listened when you talked and remembered details later. I liked that. I liked how steady he felt. For the first year, things were easy, effortless. We laughed a lot. We cooked together. We spent weekends wandering bookstores and farmers markets. He told me he loved how grounded I was, how I balanced him out. I told him I loved how calm he made me feel. It sounded healthy. It felt real. We moved in together after 8 months. His apartment was bigger, closer to his job, and it made sense financially. He told me not to worry about rent at first since his name was on the lease. I covered groceries, utilities, and most of our dinners out. It felt fair. It felt like partnership. The first crack appeared so quietly I almost missed it. We were supposed to meet as friends for brunch one Sunday. I got dressed, waited by the door, keys in hand. Evan came out of the bedroom in sweatpants, scrolling on his phone. "I'm exhausted," he said. "You go ahead." I told him I didn't know his friends well, that it would be awkward without him. He waved me off. "They'll love you. Just go." I went. I sat at a table with 5 people who barely looked up from their phones. Polite smiles, surface-level questions. I left after 30 minutes feeling like an extra in someone else's story. When I got home, Evan was laughing at something on his laptop. He didn't ask how it went. He didn't even notice I was back. That became the pattern. He'd make plans, then cancel on me, but expect me to still show up. Or I'd come home from work to find a living room full of his friends he'd invited over without telling me. He'd introduce me casually, then drift away, leaving me to hover until someone needed a drink or wanted to talk about something neutral. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself this was just how social people operated. I didn't want to be the needy girlfriend. I didn't want to be the one who made everything heavy. Then Lena reappeared. At first it was just texts. Evan's phone lighting up while we watched movies. A smile I didn't recognize. A name I pretended not to read. When I asked him about it, casually, he shrugged. "We're friends. We've been friends since college. It's not weird." I believed him, or at least I told myself I did. But then Lena started showing up. She was at the bar when we met his friends for drinks. She was at the park during a group picnic. She was at our apartment one evening when I came home from work, sitting on the couch like she'd always belonged there. Evan introduced her like it was nothing. "This is Lena. We dated in college." I shook her hand. She smiled politely. Evan didn't stand. He asked me to grab beers from the kitchen for all of us. I remember standing at the fridge, bottles in my hands, staring at the condensation and thinking, this feels wrong, not explosive wrong, just quietly, unmistakably wrong. What bothered me wasn't that she existed. It was how Evan changed when she was around. He sat closer to her than to me, laughed harder at her jokes, brought up memories they shared, trips they'd taken, inside jokes I couldn't follow. And whenever I tried to join in, he'd give me this look, not annoyed, more like I was interrupting something private. One night after dinner, one of his friends, Ruby, pulled me aside while we waited for our rides. She looked uncomfortable, like she was debating whether to say anything at all. "Tammy," she said quietly, "I don't know if Evan told you, but he and Lena were really serious, like almost engaged." My stomach dropped. Evan had told me they dated. He hadn't told me that. Ruby bit her lip. "Some of us think it's weird how much time they're spending together. Evan gets defensive when we bring it up." I thanked her and sat in silence the whole ride home. That night, Evan was already asleep. I stood in the doorway watching him breathe, wondering if I should wake him up and ask the question I was afraid of. "Are you still in love with her?" I didn't. I told myself I didn't want to start a fight. I told myself I was imagining things. 2 weeks later, he told me about the dinner. "Some of my college friends are coming to town," he said. "We're doing dinner at that Italian place downtown. You should come." I asked who would be there. He listed names. Lena was one of them. I nodded like it didn't matter. The day of the dinner, he spent nearly 2 hours getting ready. Changed shirts, fixed his hair, checked his phone constantly. I asked if he was excited. He said yes. He hadn't seen some of these people in years. I asked if Lena was coming. He paused, just for a second, then said, "Yeah, I think so." And as we walked into that restaurant, watching his face light up for her in a way it hadn't lit up for me in months, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I wasn't walking into a dinner. I was walking into proof. And when he whispered those 5 words and sent me to the end of the table, it wasn't a mistake. It was the pattern, finally exposed. That night in the hotel, staring at the ceiling, I didn't ask myself if I should talk to him. I asked myself why I'd stayed so long explaining away what my body had known for months. By morning, the decision wasn't dramatic. It was done. I drove back to Evan's apartment at 10 the next morning, knowing exactly where he'd be. Thursdays were his standing meeting days, the kind he always complained about because they ran long and made him irritable. I parked on the street instead of the garage, partly because I didn't want to run into anyone, partly because I didn't want to feel like I was coming home. I wasn't. I was closing something. I let myself in with my key. The apartment was quiet, sunlight cutting across the floor, his place still arranged the way he liked it. Minimal, clean, comfortable. And suddenly it hit me how little of me was actually in that space. A few clothes in the closet, my books on one shelf, the coffee maker I bought because he said his tasted weird. I stood there for a moment and realized I hadn't moved in. I'd been allowed in. I didn't rush. I packed only what was mine. Clothes first, folded neatly like muscle memory took over. My laptop, my charger, the books I'd brought from my old place, the framed photo of my dog that sat on the shelf like proof I existed before this relationship. I didn't touch his things. I didn't slam drawers or make noise. There was no anger in my hands, just resolve. By the third trip to my car, my shaking stopped. By 11:15, I was done. I set my key on the kitchen counter where he couldn't miss it. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing left to explain. He'd already explained everything with a whisper and a chair. I drove straight to my friend Maverick's place in Selwood. He opened the door, took one look at the boxes in my arms, and didn't ask questions. He just stepped aside and said, "Couch is yours as long as you need." That was the first kindness that day that didn't come with conditions. That night, I turned my phone back on. 216 messages. Most from Evan, some from numbers I didn't recognize, 3 from Lena. I didn't open any of them. I didn't need to see the progression to know how it went. Confusion to anger, anger to pleading, pleading to panic. I went straight to my settings and blocked Evan's number. Then Lena's, then every unknown number that had tried to reach me like I was something they could crowd back into place. Then I called my provider and changed my number entirely. 30 minutes. That's all it took to disappear from a version of my life that didn't deserve access to me anymore. When the confirmation message came through, something in my chest finally unclenched. The next day, Evan emailed me. Subject line, "Please read this." I deleted it without opening it. He sent 4 more that week. I set up a filter to auto-delete anything from his address. It wasn't cruelty, it was protection. A few days later, Ruby texted me from a number I hadn't blocked. She said she'd heard what happened and that she was sorry. She told me gently that most of them thought Evan had been way out of line. She told me Lena had always been a sore spot, that Evan let her blur lines because it made him feel wanted. "You deserve better," she said. I thanked her and asked what happened after I left. She told me Evan tried to play it off at first, said I wasn't feeling well. Then I didn't come back. His mood tanked. Lena kept hovering, which only made it worse. By the end of dinner, half the table was uncomfortable, and the other half was confused. Evan spent the rest of the night glued to his phone, convinced I'd come back and apologize. I didn't. Over the next 2 weeks, I heard bits and pieces through mutual friends. Evan showed up at my office once, only to be stopped by security. He called Maverick's phone 6 times before Maverick blocked him. He even messaged my mom on Facebook asking if I was okay. My mom replied once and only once, "Tammy is fine. Please respect her space." That was the moment I realized I wasn't imagining how bad this had been. Other people saw it too. I slept better on Maverick's couch than I had in months. Not because it was comfortable, but because I wasn't bracing for the next moment I'd be made small. I wasn't waiting for the next apology that quietly blamed me for needing it. 3 weeks after the dinner, Ruby sent me a screenshot. It was a group text Evan had sent to his college friends. He admitted he messed up, that he hurt me, but that I wouldn't even talk to him, that I blocked him, that I changed my number. "How am I supposed to fix this if she won't give me a chance?" he wrote. Someone replied, "Maybe she doesn't want you to fix it." Lena replied, "Tammy was always kind of sensitive. You're better off." Another friend shut that down immediately. "Lena, stop. This is exactly why she left." The chat spiraled. Accusations, defensiveness. Lena left the thread. Evan didn't respond after that. I read it once and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just distance. Because the need to be understood by people who already decided who you are eventually runs out. And when it does, leaving stops feeling dramatic. It starts feeling inevitable. A month after I left, I ran into one of Evan's coworkers at a coffee shop near my office. Her name was Chloe. We'd met a few times at work events, enough to recognize each other without pretending we were close. She hesitated before sitting down, like she wasn't sure if she should say anything at all. Then she did. "I don't know if anyone's told you this," she said quietly, "but Evan's not doing great." I didn't answer. I just waited. Chloe sighed and kept going. Evan had been missing deadlines. zoning out in meetings. Their manager had pulled him aside and asked if everything was okay, and Evan had broken down crying in the conference room. When I asked what he said, Chloe looked uncomfortable. He told them I left him out of nowhere, that I disappeared, that I wouldn't explain. He made it sound like I ghosted him for no reason. Hearing it didn't hurt the way I expected. It just confirmed something I already knew. Evan needed to be the person people felt sorry for. He needed the story where I was unreasonable and he was blindsided. Chloe leaned closer and lowered her voice. Ruby had told her what actually happened. She'd seen the way Lena hovered around Evan. She said she didn't blame me for leaving. I thanked her and watched her walk away, then sat there for a while staring at my coffee, thinking about how easy it is to erase someone's dignity when they're not in the room to defend it. More pieces filtered in through mutual friends. Evan's social media shifted from normal posts to vague quotes about heartbreak and confusion. Photos disappeared. Comments were limited. Then quietly, Lena started showing up in his posts again. 3 weeks later, I heard they tried dating. It lasted less than a month. Apparently, Lena got back together with another ex and didn't bother telling Evan until he saw photos online. Evan deleted his accounts after that. No announcement, no closure, just silence. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel smug. I felt grateful I wasn't inside that chaos anymore. What surprised me was how fast my body adjusted once I was out. The tightness in my chest eased. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head. I stopped wondering how I should phrase things so they wouldn't be taken the wrong way. I realized how much of myself I'd been editing just to stay in that relationship, how often I'd chosen quiet over honesty because it felt safer. A few people reached out, carefully. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Some admitted they'd noticed the way Evan treated me, but didn't know how to say anything. I thanked them and let the conversations end there. I wasn't collecting allies. I was rebuilding myself. The strangest part was the absence of drama once I stopped participating. No confrontations, no final speeches, just space. And in that space, I started remembering who I was before I learned how to shrink. It's been 6 months since I walked out of that restaurant. I'm still staying with Maverick, but I've started looking at apartments again. Ones with big windows and quiet mornings. I got a promotion at work, the kind that happens when you're not spending half your energy managing someone else's emotions. I started running again. Joined a rec league softball team on Tuesdays. I forgot how good it feels to have plans that don't revolve around someone else's mood. I started seeing someone new a couple of months ago. His name is Ethan. He works at the bookstore near my office. He's kind in a steady way, the kind of man who listens without interrupting and doesn't need to make himself bigger by making anyone else smaller. The first time we went out with his friends, he introduced me with my full name and smiled like he was proud I was there. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did, but it did. I don't think about Evan much anymore. When I do, it isn't the good memories that surface, it's the whisper. Please don't say anything in front of my friends. It's the chair at the end of the table. It's the moment he decided my presence was something to manage instead of something to value. Someone asked me once if I regretted not giving him a chance to explain. I said no. There was nothing to explain. He showed me exactly who he was. He whispered his priorities and then sat down next to them. A few months ago, Ruby told me Evan had asked about me, asked if anyone had heard from me, asked if I was okay. Ruby didn't pass the message along. She said she figured if I wanted him to know anything, I'd tell him myself. She was right. I don't hate Evan. I don't wish him harm. I just don't make space for him anymore. That seat at the end of the table, the one he pointed me toward, I left it empty. And when I walked out, I didn't leave a single piece of myself behind. Walking away wasn't about punishment or pride. It was about refusing to be minimized in public and managed in private. It was about choosing a life where I don't have to ask for the basic dignity of being seen. Once you stop shrinking, you realize how much room there actually is.